everyone. I'm Virginia Duan, also known as Mandarin Mama. I'm the host of this podcast, Noona ARMY Podcast, where we discuss the particular aspects of being a middle-aged BTS fan. I'm the entertainment editor for Mochi Magazine and I'm a freelance writer and the founder of Brazen Asian, which is an internet retreat for Asian Pacific Islander and Desi American creatives and influencers. Today, I have a special guest. Edward. Do we want to call you Edward? Or
Edward? Call me Edward because my Korean name is like not pronounceable to most people. Even the Koreans get like tripped up over it.
Okay, so how do you say your Korean name?
It's Do Woo-jung, but Do is like not a common Korean last name. It's not like Kim Park, Lee Chung, or Tae. So like people are always like, "Oh, are you really a Do?" I'm like, "That's really my last name. I promise you, it's a real Korean last name." And they're like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm absolutely sure." So just call me Ed.
Okay. All right, because I realized that I've never actually had to say your name in person because we've only been online friends. So like I only had to like just text you, and I never actually had to say your name while texting. So,
yes, we've been online friends for almost a year and a half, 2 years now.
Right. So I'm very excited. So is there stuff you wanted to, is there a place people can follow you? Do you want people to follow you? Oh, wait, you're not on social media, right?
Yeah, so my name's Edward. I don't really use social media because I'm a communications professional and I have to be on social media constantly in my professional life. So I try to take a break from it in my personal life as much as possible. That being said, if you want to see me like go on like political tirades or like profanity-laden rants, you can always check out my writing on Diverging magazine, of which Virginia is an editor. Or you can check me out on Progressive Asian American Christians, PAAC Fam, which is the queer subgroup of Progressive Asian American Christians. Or you can just generally look at my wall. Edward Veer Walrod is what I go by because white privilege is real. And I will often post things that aren't PC for most people, but they're progressive, so I think they're okay in the end of the day.
And also, there's just a unique pleasure in watching you like just eviscerate people, and not people, but like bad thinking and like bad thoughts, like not bad, like just poorly thought out things, and like just watching the vivisection happen is just so pleasing.
Stella Wan Phelps from Progressive Asian American Christians likes to compare me to a dragon. And when people tag me to like take people down on other political pages or on their personal statuses, if they post something stupid, they've often tagged my name, Dracarys. Yeah, and I've actually grown quite fond of that. Even though it's like labor for me, and like sometimes I am annoyed about it if they haven't talked to me previous to it. I do find it really funny that people have started associating me as a dragon who will just like sort of breathe fire in the general direction that you tell me to.
Yes, it is. It's such a great power. Like, I wish I could be that like coherent and like incisive. No, I really do.
No, stay pure, stay innocent, stay great, stay as someone who like people will listen to when you call them out, versus me who just like, Edward's being mean, I'm not going to listen to the points behind his like expletives. The reason why I talk like this is because I was a college debater, and being sort of a queer college debater with a nasally voice like mine, and people just sort of ignore you during the debate, really annoys you. So I just sort of built this reputation even in college debate as someone who would like yell at the other person.
Oh my God.
But like make a very like sort of structured argument, being like, this is your analysis and here's why it's BS. This is your warrant and this is why you're a fucker. And here's why you're going to lose this entire fucking case, you piece of shit. And like it got attention. But I had to go through college debate to sort of build that persona, and that's something I would never recommend someone else doing.
So like 20 minutes later, we'll get to the topic of our podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Just don't do it. College debate is essentially every rich or middle class white philosophy major goes to just hear themselves speak on issues like poverty or racism or sexism. And then afterward, they get high in someone's basement while getting crossfaded with alcohol, and then continue to debate those subjects after the round is done.
It sounds delightful.
Yeah, it's absolutely miserable. Don't do it.
All right. Okay, well let's move on to a very delightful subject. Ed here is a huge fan of BTS, and your bias is what? Jin and RM, I think.
Yeah, Jin and RM all the way.
Yeah, in more ways than one. And so I feel like we talk on my podcast. I've talked a lot about Sugar because he's my bias. But what people might not know is that Jin's my record, like my ultimate record. And I just he's just, I didn't understand him at first. And I didn't like him as much, or I just thought he was like nice, but I thought he was just really arrogant. But then once I understood him, I was like, he is my favorite. So tell us why you love Jin.
Yeah, so I think you actually like hit the nail on the head for me too. Jin for me was a grower, not a shower. In more ways than one.
But we all know he's a shower.
Now he is, right? But originally he was a shower. So I think a lot of it is when I first got into sort of like K-pop and watching videos and whatnot, Jin had the weakest sort of dance moves, so he didn't really stand out in the crowd. BTS also started out more as like heavy rap hip hop rather than sort of like the pop and soul directions that they've sort of morphed into along with their hip hop and rap. And Jin's vocals are really made for sort of like power ballads or solos or like really big, powerful notes. But when they were doing things like Mic Drop, right, he just sort of faded back, and that's one of my favorite songs. He just sort of faded into the crowd, and his dancing is not particularly sharp compared to the others in the group like Jungkook or even RM. So he just wasn't someone that popped up on my radar a lot. A lot of the times when you saw interviews of earlier BTS, sort of on Korean variety shows too, he wouldn't speak a lot, and then when he would speak, it would come off sort of a little arrogant or a little sort of grating. But as you got to know more of the backstory of Jin, why he's the way he is, but like also realize that Jin is like a big part of BTS as like a soulful movement, right? When other people, when sort of like Jungkook or V talks about members of the group that they like really love and why they love it, they always mention Jin sort of as like a glue of the family, of holding them together in some way. Jin has also gone through a lot of personal crises that he's been very open to talk about in sort of interviews, which I think is like a very big milestone. He's talked about body image issues. He's talked about sort of androgyny. He's talked about a lot of political issues, as BTS normally does.
Wait. Tell me about these interviews. I don't think I've actually read these interviews.
Right. So if you go on like a lot of interviews of just Jin, right, in like sort of Korean media, he's talked a lot about these interviews, or like he's talked about sort of like the pressures of K-pop industry, like body image issues, sort of like those things and how they sort of affect him as well, right? I think it's also really interesting because Jin, for those of you who may not know, has a few solo sort of songs out that he's recorded or that he's written. And a lot of them have to do with like themes of like sort of love. And as much as like love can be really problematic in songs, what I really appreciate about these songs about Jin is like him letting go of sort of like those past loves, flames, friendships, when he realizes that they're sort of in a different moment or space. And so I find a really sort of comfort in that, because as someone who has social anxiety, as someone who has anxiety about letting go of old people who were really good friends of mine, but for whatever reason I found really problematic or grating, or for some reason our lives weren't lined up to be friends anymore. I sort of looked to a lot of these songs that said it's okay to let go. It's okay to feel pain and emotional about these sort of like fading relationships, but ultimately it's for the better, and we just weren't right for each other. And I think it's just a really good sort of, it's a healthier mindset to approach about love in song form than what we see in a lot of Western genres. That's sort of like, we're really bad for each other. We're super problematic. Let's make this work. And
so what songs, are you talking about his covers, or are you talking about, because I'm only aware of him writing Tonight, but I know he's covered a lot of songs. And I really
so a lot of the covers that he chooses to sing are very sort of intentional. Some of the interviews he does about the covers he decides to sing or put out, he's like really intentional about choosing these covers, right? It's not like him being like, I just like how this one sounded, or my vocals played really well on this. Certainly that there's that element, but he also talks about the message behind why he chose these songs, why he found these songs to be sort of the ones that he was going to go for.
I'm so bitter right now that I cannot recreate, because I have never ever heard of these interviews. No, I feel like I've found a lot of interviews, like like even Japanese ones and like finding like translations of those and like I feel like I do admit that I've read the most about RM and Suga because they are the most prolific, I guess.
I think it's prolificness. RM also is the most fluent in English, so there's sort of like a media bias there. I also think the issue is a lot of media like to report on sort of BTS as larger political issues or sort of things that catch people's eyes, but you're not going to hear a lot about sort of like personal issues, especially not from like Korean media, right? Which has traditionally, although it's slowly starting to change, been hesitant to report about things like body image issues within the K-pop industry for fear of reprisals from companies who often encourage these body issues for various reasons.
Right. Wow. Oh, the things I have learned today. I love Jin. So I guess, like, what has he said about like body issues, like just for people who haven't?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think I forgot who else, but someone else in BTS has also been very open about body image issues.
Maybe Jimin?
I believe it was Jimin, and then like Jimin was just like at my height of like of anorexia, or as he was struggling with his anorexia, he said he was eating like 2 chicken breasts a day in a salad, right? And like he was fainting, and then like other members of BTS was like, hey, like we're really worried about you. And Jin sort of talks about sort of him not being at that point or level, right? But him struggling with sort of feeling self-conscious about what other people say about him. If you sort of like look at Jin and how he's like transformed too, there's a lot of different sort of aesthetics he can go for, right? Like androgyny aesthetics that's very common in K-pop versus like more like traditional masculine aesthetics that like sometimes come out in BTS, and sort of like the backlash he's gotten for both have been very interesting. But also
he's got a backlash for
right. So there's a lot of backlash, right? Because like a lot of people, even in Korea, right, a lot of people are sort of like androgyny is very, it's looked down upon by more conservative facets of society, right? And then in more liberal facets of society or progressive facets of society, sort of androgyny is well received. But then if they revert to sort of a more masculine aesthetic, then they're criticized for sort of rolling back the progress that they've sort of made in that industry, right?
That's
so it's sort of a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Oh, but as a huge fan of both androgyny and traditionally masculine looks, I'm like, what's the problem?
As someone who's attracted to both, I'm just going like, give me both.
Right?
All day, every day.
Yes. I mean, the answer is yes. The answer is always yes.
Right? The answer is just please give me all of it, right? But he also talks about sort of like really toxic K-pop industry scenes. And I think this is across BTS, right? But I think sort of knowing Jin, his story, it particularly resonates in like the songs that he chooses to do. Also, I think Jin is just like also like smoking hot, and I would do very, very evil things if I had the chance.
Yes.
With consent.
Consent is sexy. We love consent.
Yes.
But also
consent is sexy, especially when they give consent for very evil things.
Yes. The dirtier, the better.
Exactly. And Jin is the one, if someone was just like, you can only choose one, I'd be like, Jin, absolutely, like, take him away from me.
I'd be like, it would have to be Suga. Can't help it. He's just, his hands. I can't get over his hands. This is not a 21 plus podcast, so we'll just leave it at that. We're all grown. We can infer what I mean. I guess, like, what I really liked about him is because, well, so he was actually one of the first faces I recognized. I recognized RM. When did you get into BTS?
Oh, like the first album, such like when they started first producing things. I think I was sort of a more casual follower, but I've really recently gone to sort of like fusion music, right? Where like you take like traditional elements of like Asian music or like Korean music in particular, because that's what I'm familiar with, and then you fuse it with like modern pop elements as well.
No wonder you're all over Data.
Right. That's why I really like sort of like someone took like all the audio from BTS's like Melon Awards like Idol music, which was like the Kugak version that came out in the trailer, but it wasn't their official music video. And they took out all the audience screams and they just had that. I was like, this is amazing, right?
Yes.
So when I started really appreciating them though is that there was a K-pop convention in France, and I don't attend K-pop conventions for various reasons, but I saw this video and it was them performing in France, and what was really interesting is they did a pop version of Arirang, which is like, sort of like
I see that. Yes.
right, like Korea's like unofficial like national anthem, like in like we have one, but like no one really knows all the lyrics versus like tell someone sing Arirang and they can sing it front to back. And they did a really interesting sort of fusion version of like Arirang with their like K-pop style, came up with a dance for it. And I just like really started appreciating them after this. I was like, this is actually really fantastic and excellent. I want to see like where they go and where they take it. And then like the moment that they like dropped mic drop or mic drop, depending on how you want to say it, like I was just like, I'm sold. Like I want them. I want them all the time.
Yes. Yes. I am so sad I did not discover them until January 2018. And
it's
that was
totally okay.
I mean, no, I feel bitter that I was cheated out of like, because I could have gone to all those concerts in the US, you know what I'm saying, for a lot cheaper and a lot closer. I'm like very, very bitter. I don't know, because I was actually hugely pregnant for a lot of them. But well, I'm always pregnant, or I was. I was pretty much.
I mean, some people, right, when they're pregnant, listen to classical music because they believe that the baby will develop into a smarter child. I personally believe take it to a BTS concert and scream your head off, and the baby's gonna be a genius.
No, I think I've been to a concert with every pregnancy. So
okay.
So like with my first kid, I was this is when Britney Spears kind of went off the rails. So I went to her like first concert. After that, it was so disappointing. And then I waddled. I think I was like 2 weeks away from like delivery at the Jay-Z JT concert for my third kid, and like their stadium tour. And then I don't know. I've just been to a lot of concerts hugely pregnant, and I feel like that's been good. But I'm just bitter that I didn't find them earlier, even though I know that I probably would not have resonated with their message if I had found them during their school trilogy versus when I found them, which was during Love Yourself.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, right? Because sort of like one of my biggest gripes with K-pop is sort of like there's a lot of like AVE appropriation, a lot of like African-American cultural appropriation. There's a lot of offensiveness that goes on in here, and there's a lot of problematic elements, body image, like sexism, racism, right? Like we can go through it all. They have it all, ableism, right? It's all there. What really solidifies sort of why I appreciate BTS, even though they still have problematic elements of like sort of Black cultural appropriation, right? Is sort of like they were blacklisted by the Korean government during Park Geun-hye's presidency.
Were they?
Because they were so pro sort of social liberality, right? They're pro gay rights, they're very pro abortion, and they've never been silent about it, right? And Park Geun-hye was like not a great president and like very sort of restrictive of those rights and social freedoms. But then like when the ferry disaster happened and Park Geun-hye like screwed that up, which eventually led to her impeachment with the whole cult scandal, they were the first major band that was still under contract from a major label that came out and publicly called on further investigations and corruption allegations and sort of like
they actually said something. I thought it was all implied through Spring Day, and I didn't realize they actually said anything.
No, they went out and said it, right? And like I think like what was interesting is there was a lot of sort of heavy implication before they came out and said it, right? They would like post like messages, like a lot of their songs were like sort of referencing like corruption. But what was interesting about it was as soon as the government was just like, we're gonna blacklist you for all this sort of like subtle protesting, right? Then they were just like full on like waving the flag of like political like corruption, political involvement. So it's been like really interesting to see how what was a politically non-conscious society sort of like has evolved into this politically conscious society. But like you have BTS to thank, I think, for a lot of the political consciousness among like younger people who listen to them. But also like starting this trend of like socially responsible celebrities who have social issues as like their main sort of bread and butter or philanthropic movement. So I'm kind of glad you joined after BTS like sort of like came out with all of that, because I think that's like when I was just like, no, BTS is like progressive in the Korean context, and this is the BTS I want people to know about.
Yeah, no, I mean, even at the very beginning, right? Their debut song is actually pretty transgressive in terms of like No More Dream and then NO and then like it's not like it's a new thing for them, I guess.
Right.
But I think it wasn't. But I'm still bitter. I'm still bitter that I did not. Although it's like I don't know if I would. I pretty much ignored Jungkook for like until Fake Love, right? Because he was a baby,
right,
and an actual baby, someone I could have actually given birth to. You know what upsets me? What upsets me is that the Mangne line, I started college before any of them were born. I was in the first quarter at UCLA when Jimin, V were born, and then like 2 years later, Jungkook was born. I was like, it really upsets me. It upsets me on like a soul level.
Well, I am old enough where they could marry me. So if I do get married to one of them, you could adopt me legally, so you would legally be related to them in some way. I am fine with this.
I don't want to be related to them. I want to know them in a biblical way. By that I mean on a soul level.
Map out their soul.
Yes. Yes, I would. I actually told my husband the other day. What did I tell him? I said something like, Don't diss Sugar's music just because I love him more than I love you. Okay? I have been with my husband for 19 years. And I was just like, don't fuck with my man. He's like, we have children together. I was like, I don't care. I don't care.
I mean, I think every relationship needs to have an honest conversation at some point, which is you get 5 people.
No, 7. I get 7.
You get 5. 7 in this case, but in theory, you get 5 to 10 people that if they were to somehow fall in love with you and propose to you, you're allowed to leave your spouse no matter how in love you are, just instant, and there's no hard feelings, right? Like,
no, my husband has already agreed, and I was like,
oh, great.
Yeah, and I was like, you do know I'm not joking, right? Like, because there's that Reddit article that came out where this guy's girlfriend like cheated on him with her like cheat guy, but he was like some YouTube singer or whatever, right. And he was like, and I was like, no, I told him about it because it was hilarious and sad, and then I was like, I just want you to know that when I say if any member of BTS said let's go, I'd be like, okay, like this is not a hypothetical situation. This is me legit telling you that I will sleep with them. if they want me, I will be theirs.
And the reason why you know that your husband's a keeper is because he agreed to this.
Because he knows that it will never happen. That's like saying, sure, Virginia, when we get to Mars, you can also have real estate on Mars. Like, okay. No,
but he also knows that he can't do better than you, right? Like, I want to make this clear to anyone in sort of like a partner relationship in any way, shape, or form. The reason why people have trouble breaking up with their partners or their boyfriends in my situation is because it's a sunk cost fallacy, right? Like, you have put so much labor into turning a heaping pile of shit into like rough diamonds. They're not polished yet, but they're still rough diamonds with some sort of future, even more future value. But they have more value than when you first found them. So if you break up with them, someone else gets your labor for free. They don't have to do any labor. You just gave them diamonds on a fucking gold platter, right? Like, that is why people don't break up with each other, right? So even in this case with your husband, Virginia, I feel like your husband's like, I have gold. Why would I be angry if someone else wants to, like, let's say, have that gold for a little bit, right? Like I'm just saying, like, your husband realizes he cannot get gold again.
That's kind of you, but actually it is mostly because we're together, still out of inertia, really. Like, he's too lazy to learn someone else's rule and like get yelled at in new ways, right? Like, he's been trained for like 19 years, like being yelled at in a certain way, right? Like,
but
he doesn't want to learn.
Cost fallacy right there. You
right,
train him.
right. So he doesn't want to learn new rules, right? Like, he doesn't want to make the effort. and I don't want to train anyone else. And we like each other reasonably well. I mean, and I told him this. I was like, honey, I would actually never say honey. I don't say honey. I'm sorry. I don't know why that came out. I said, husband. Actually, people know his name. James. Like, you do know, like, we're just married because, like, your purpose is available dick. Right? You do know this, right? And then he's like, okay. I was like, I mean, look, it's not that either of us would be opposed to the other person just going out looking for somebody. I mean, I would be opposed if you didn't tell me, but like,
Right.
Like if it was agreed upon, if like, let's say neither of us wanted to have sex with the other person forever, then like it'd be rude of me to like force him to like never have sex with another person again, right? Like that's, but like, who wants to go through this trouble of like making sure this person's like like disease free? They're not gonna murder you after you fuck them, like all these like unknown like what if they're bad? Or like, what if you're not that great? Like all these things, but like available D.
but the great part about BTS is that they're certified fresh, right? Like they are like USDA Prime. Like you have nothing to fear. You don't need to verify. Someone else has done that. Millions of people have already done that.
I really hope so. I really hope they're just getting the best sex of their life. This is derailed because we were talking about Jin, but I suppose he also has DSL, so this is actually pertinent.
Yes.
Because he's a snack. But anyway, like, yeah, so I didn't, the beauty of a podcast is it could just meander and we could just come back to this. But like what I didn't understand about Jin was that, because I just thought he was like arrogant. So like I recognize RM's face the most, and it was easier to like relate to because he spoke English, right? Like, right. And his lyrics are in English, but then Jin's face is undeniable. And so because most of the videos, I came in like right after DNA, like so in the Her era, and like these man face hadn't come in yet, right? Like and Jungkook is still a baby, and then Jimin is, well, I mean, he's excellent. There's nothing really to say about that. So Jin's face was like very attractive. And because I saw them so much later, I didn't see anything wrong with his dancing. I didn't. Right. And like, they were still Puma.
Right.
And like the fake love video where Jin isn't just like that. Oh my God.
I think it's interesting too, right? When we talk about Jin and like sort of the supposed arrogance that Jin has, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot lost in translation. I think you also need to put in cultural context too, right? Like every K-pop star, as much as I love a lot of K-pop, right, has a very sort of, they need to, especially if they're under a big contract, right? They all have to have a cookie cutter personality in some way, but every part of their personality is like some level of like humbleness, right? Where they like can't brag, whether they can't own themselves. They literally don't own themselves in some cases, right? But they can't really own themselves. They can't really talk about like what they like about themselves, right? They have to stay humble because there's a lot of, a lot of Korean culture and Asian culture in general revolves around like workplace humbleness, right? And like you can't really criticize, but you also can't really take like credit. Like it's a very like weird sort of like toxic like circular argument, right? Whereas like Jin sort of owns that like in a lot of ways that like he's good at what he does, right? That he loves what he does, and that's why he's so good at it too, right? I think a lot of like the Korean public like took that as like arrogance initially, right? They were like so arrogant. He doesn't fit this cookie cutter personality that we have for him, and that's precisely why I like his personality so much, right? But then when you hear him talk and you like know his backstory, like that arrogance is just like him sort of like owning who he is, in a way that's like really sort of fresh and new and sort of against countercultural in Korean in a lot of ways. So.
Well, I didn't realize until later that the reason why he always said those things was to like make his other members feel comfortable. Right? Like it's just like, it's so ridiculous. It's so over the top that like it's like a cringe laugh, like, oh my God. But then everyone's like, okay, he falls on that grenade, right? Like he falls on the grenade for everybody else. He can draw the like derision or whatever. And then the other people could be themselves, like, and I feel like when I realized that's what he did, or like the fact that his ears would like the fact that his whole body flushes, and I would really like to like verify scientifically just how much of his body flushes when he's embarrassed. I said that out loud. I'm so sorry. Not sorry. You know, like just the fact that he's so like he's actually embarrassed, but he's not. You know what I mean? And like, and it's just, and he's so kind. I feel like Weverse has been really, really good for Jin. Weverse has been really good for Jin and V because they're so like Jin is, and everyone always like says he's savage, and then all the translators like no, he's not savage. Like he's teasing people like very like the words he uses are very soft and kind, but he's still like teasing people, and I feel like he's just really kind. I feel like actually that's I feel like of all characteristics of BTS members in general is that they're kind. Like they're very kind. Like Suga, even though he's savage, is kind. You know, like they're all kind. And I feel like Jin especially is kind.
Yes, absolutely.
Even when he's arrogant, it's like it's out of kindness to his members. Like when he asks them, like, who would you rather be the oldest? You want me or you want Suga? And everyone's like, no, you would be the best. Like if Suga was the oldest, we'd be like, fuck. Like and differently, but like, you know, like it'd just be a different dynamic, right?
Right. No, he just owns it, right? And like he owns it in a way that's sort of like both sort of like self-sacrificing and like a really kind way. I know there's a lot about Jin that I think like people get hung up on. And I'm just like, I wish you sort of take a look at the context and why Jin is like this. Because it makes you actually love Jin just so much more. Yes.
And like if you think about the fact that he's the baby of his family, right? His immediate family. But then now he's in charge of, like not in charge, but like he's not the leader of the group, but he's the oldest of the group. So he should technically get a lot more respect than they give him, right? I think, from what I understand, which could be totally wrong.
He built a camaraderie, right? But like that's also countercultural, right? He's like the oldest in the group, and like they don't call him like Hyung, right? Like they don't like use honorifics with him all the time. It just kind of shows it's countercultural, right? Like Jin is countercultural in so many ways as a result. It's like really refreshing. Because even within like, you know, like one of the groups that came out of my favorite problematic reality TV show, Produce 101, in this case, One, right? Like all the girls refer to each other as like using honorifics, right? Like it's like very formal, it's very rigid. You don't have that with BTS. It's because sort of like Jin is comfortable enough where he's broken down those barriers of hierarchy and like sort of social strata. It's like really refreshing to see.
And then just like he cooks for them, he like takes it. Actually, Suga is also like this, but like, you know, like wakes up early for them, you know, like takes them fishing. Like he's just, it's like I wish I knew him. Like I feel like that's the key with BTS. Like I feel like I've said that about so many things about BTS. I feel like that's the key. You're like, really, which one? There's so many things that you said are the key. But like, you just want to be their friend. Like, he just sounds like a really cool person. Like someone who makes you feel comfortable, who like cares about you and kind. And I think I used to feel like he wasn't. I find him and J-Hope the most mysterious, right? Because I feel like they have very clear boundaries with ARMY and with the public. J-Hope especially. Oh my God, J-Hope is like boundary king. I love him.
J-Hope is a murder mystery novel. There's something there that you need to like dig through. But like, no, I totally agree, right? Like, Jin is the type of person that you're like, you know what it is? It's like, after hearing all these stories about Jin, you're just kind of like, if I was going through a rough time, Jin would be the one to be like, hey, let's go out for lunch and like coffee and like have a fun day at like an amusement park or something.
Yeah.
You know that's Jin's personality because he's done that before.
Right. And like, I think I used to find him, I think I was like Jimin and like RM, like I didn't understand him. Like, you know, they were like, we don't get it. Like, why do you only focus on the good things? Because that would piss me off. Actually, my husband's like this. Like, I feel like so you know how like the ARMY lore is that like your bias is you and then your wrecker is your soulmate? And I feel like that's actually pretty accurate. Like, I feel like I'm very, very similar to Suga. And then like, Jin is actually very similar to my husband because my husband like very rarely focuses on like the bad things. He's just like, well, let's just move on. Let's go. Like, and I'm like, no, we have to wallow. Like, we have to like figure it out. He's like, but why? Like, we're miserable. You're like on the floor. Like you can't get out of bed. Like, why can't we? Like, why do we have to focus on this? Let's move on. let's just be happy. And I'm like, no. He's like, you don't seem like this is working. you can't get out of bed. This is not a good thing for you. Like,
oh, I'm the same way, right? Like if something
like,
bad happens, I'm just kind of like, it's over. Everything's done. I'm gonna be angry or upset about this. Like even if it's a small thing for like longer than I should be, longer that's really healthy. But that's a conversation for my therapist and not your audience. But Jin's music, right? Like I don't know. Like there's something about the songs he chooses and the song that he has written and he put out, right? That's always sort of like, it is okay to feel like this. Mm-hmm. You will move on, and like that is why I like Jin so much, right? Like that, and the fact that he's like a moving 6-pack with eyes, and like I just like
and really his shoulders and
his shoulders, ooh, and his face and his like line and just everything about him.
He's just, I miss his mullet. A fantastic mullet.
Yes.
Not the fake one that they put in for the like pictures, but like
I really like his. I think what's like really interesting about Jin is he is the BTS member that I have seen the most with like his natural hair color, right? His like very vertically black Korean hair, and like contrasted with like his like sort of like skin, right, which is like very very white, which is like also problematic for like various reasons, but like right, like that sort of contrast up between like the juxtaposition between like his hair tone and his skin just makes her such a contrast. Like you can that there's something just like really handsome about Jin's natural hair color that just really really like, and how he wears it is just like,
well, there's a reason why black tan is the preferred all black tan. Right? Like it's why everyone's like that's why everyone's so excited right now, right? Like, because everyone's just like regular hair color, even if it's dyed back, right? Like, we don't care. We don't fucking care. It's just like, oh, that's why fake love was so great.
No, I love it. I love it so much, right? Because it's like oftentimes K-pop artists will like every time you see them, they'll have a different hair color, and like you often wonder how is their hair still on their head? Like their hair must like want to fall out or scream, but like Jin has also sort of been like, it's okay if you have different hair color. It's like all K-pop artists like do this, but the message he also sends about like, I'm also fine with my natural hair color, or like a natural hair movement back in Korea is like also something I really appreciate about it too.
Yeah, and you know what? He's like actually very brave. I feel like he's a very very brave member. Like he's the one who talked about them. The 2018, I forget which awards, where he like says, "Hey, we almost broke up."
Yeah.
Like, you know, and then like he's sobbing and like, and Jin never cries, right? Like he very rarely cries, and like he's just so brave, right? Like talks about that. He talks about, or last year when he was like, hey, you know what? Well, there's lots of good artists. You don't need to cheat.
Right.
You don't need to cheat to chart. Like there's room for all of us. There's so many people making good music. You don't have to cheat to do well, you know?
Right.
And like,
I think it's, yeah, no, that's like, I think you hit on a note too, right? Where like Jin is like private, not as private as like J-Hope, right? But like still private enough where there's a lot of mystery. But like the times that he spoke about like when they almost broke up and the reasons why they almost broke up are like really, really powerful. I think it's also really interesting, right? Because like now you have their new album with things like Black Swan, right? And like it's just like all reckons back to like Jin's speech of like, we almost broke up. There are other artists. Like we almost lost like our like in touch, like we almost lost the reason why we're doing this in the first place. And like Jin is the most vocal about it. I think just as you mentioned, Jin is kind and like is always positive, he's also the person who breaks the bad news to people for BTS a lot. And he gets a lot of hate for that, right? And like he does it with a brave face.
Yeah, and I don't think I understood him really until even like maybe after a year or so in, you know, like
honestly, talking about Jin vocally or vocalizing it almost makes me like he's like that tortured soul in those like teenage romance novels where like the main character is just like, oh, I hate him so much. Then like they slowly like start learning more about their background and they're like, wait, I love him. He's so sexy. And like I feel the same way about Jin and how I'm talking about him now.
Because he's so, well, first of all, he looks like he belongs on the lead of every K-drama ever, right? Like just that face, right? Like, and then his okay, purely, let's just get the thirst out. Like purely on an aesthetic level, he is just like the fact that he says he's worldwide handsome, the fact that he gave himself that nickname, the fact that he calls himself third guy from the left, and then like car door guy, like the fact that he acknowledges it, I feel that it's actually very brave. Because one, if he says he's not handsome, it's an obvious lie, right? Like, look, fucker, we've got eyes. Like, you're objectively a really fucking hot dude, right? Like, your face is good, your like proportions are good, you have like shoulders a mile wide, and like, just want to fight them. You know, he's got abs. You know, he's got like everybody, like all the idols, every member of BTS says like he has the best body.
Right.
You know, like, and you're like, well, I would like scientific proof, please. You know, like, the fact that he even says it, like, it feels arrogant because so few people say it, right? Like, you always, like, even in Western society where, like, people are like, oh, I was such a nerd in high school. Oh, no one liked to be in high school. And you're like, fuck you. I've seen your high school pictures. No one looked like that in high school. I hate you, right? Like, come on. You know, but he's just like, no, I'm fine. I'm an awesome dude. I'm rich, I'm wealthy, and I'm really good looking. And you're like, you are all these things. He's like, I can cook, I can, you know, like, you know, and I feel like
you're missing, Jin, is me.
Like, surely you're okay. Like my husband has said, he's fine with any of the BTS members fathering a fifth child. He's even said he would raise this child. He'll raise a child. He will call that child his. You know, as long as whoever impregnates me also pays for my other children. He's like, we're cool.
Well, so it's interesting, right? Because Jin is also the owner of a Japanese restaurant in Seoul.
He is.
So he, you know, even he's financially savvy, and that makes him more attractive, right? Because he knows that this BTS thing won't last forever. So he is like putting on. He's taking eggs out of a singular basket and just like sort of redistributing it. Like restaurant business. He's like had like other financial ventures. Mm-hmm. He doesn't live in the most like glitzy neighborhood in Seoul either, which is like really smart.
I thought Han in the Hill was like super fancy.
Yeah, but it's like not so like on the comparative it is, right? But like because Yongsan, okay, so my aunt actually also lives in Yongsan, which is where Hanamdong is, but she lives in Icheondong, which is like a different part of Yongsan-gu, also like very like rich, but like the difference is like as rich as it is, it's not Gangnam. It's not Songpa, right? It's not like Seoul or like it's not even like Hongdae, right? Like it's not like what you think of like when you think of like rich celebrity.
But I thought a lot of celebrities actually live there, or is that they're not as high?
Oh, they're not as high either, right? Like it's like not right. It's not. It's also not it's not where like Gangnam Gongju or like Gangnam princesses live, right? Like it's not what you associate with like chaebol people or like A-list celebrities like Jin, right? Like I honestly associate with like soap opera people more than I associate, or like older like celebrities as well, like celebrity chefs and whatnot, more than I associate with like K-pop stars. So
today I learned.
You are correct. It is still like a nice area of Seoul, right? But like it's not what you stereotypically think of like A-list celebrity Seoul.
Well, the fact that they still all live together. Well, I mean, who knows if that's actually true? But that's the narrative.
I want that to be true so badly.
I know. But I mean, like, come on. If you're trying to get some, like, it's really difficult.
I think the concept of different members of BTS sexiling each other is like a really funny concept to me, or when they have
what sexiling? What is
sexiling? Oh, like it's a term I learned in college, right? It's just like your roommate is hooking up with someone, they will knock on the door, and you are sexiled for however long the knock is on that door.
That's only J-Hope and Jimin, right? Because they're the other ones who share a room.
Yeah, J-Hope and Jimin definitely do. I imagine that they have like bunk beds, like singular twin bunk beds in their room. But also like I also imagine like their shared house is massive, so like they share a house, but you actually need like an intercom between rooms, or else like you can hear the person.
Well, actually, I think I don't know. Like, you know, you see all these like people like trying to piece together the blueprint of their like apartment.
Yes. Or like they tried to pinpoint based on like pictures where they live. And there was like, I forgot where it was. There was like some crazy website that like, where like, here's a list of the 20 exact addresses in Seoul where we think BTS lives.
Oh my God.
And they attached photographic and like news evidence to each particular address. I was just like, this is crazy. This is absolutely insane.
And yet I am watching this. I am consuming this.
Like I am part of this problem, don't get me wrong, but I myself recognize that this is an issue.
and as G.I. Joe taught us, still is half the battle. But yeah, like, well, he also owns a lot of real estate and just gave his parents this like super multi-million-dollar apartment, right? Like where everyone jokes that he has his like secret wife and family.
No, right. It's I don't know. I think like BTS, particularly Jin too, because he's like so beautiful, right? It's really interesting because like the idea of especially of a K-pop celebrity, but like any celebrity in Korea is like you need to do everything. You need to sing, you need to promote items, you need to be, if you're a K-pop star, you're also an actor, right? But BTS like has bucked that trend, right? Like they're not actors. They're not actively like in roles. They're not like main character casts. It's really interesting to see like how they haven't done that. And you know, given sort of how open they've been about their struggles as artists over the years, like it seems like a very conscious effort and choice where they're like, we don't want to be something that we're not, and we don't want to sacrifice sort of our artistry and singing for sort of acting.
Well, I know that they prioritize the group over everything.
Right.
Because they know that the time as a group is probably limited.
Right.
Versus like you have all the time in the world to like pursue other things, you know.
I mean, by K-pop standards, they're already pretty. Jin is already pretty old.
It's not old
enough. by Virginia standards, not old enough. By K-pop standards, getting old. By my standards, perfect age.
He's 15 years younger than me. Okay, he and Sugar are 15 years younger than me. That means
I don't know, coming from the queer community and also, frankly, watching 90 Day Fiancé a little too much, like 50 nothing, Virginia. Go get him.
I mean, I'm not opposed to this. I clearly write fan fiction about this. It's not like I'm like, so scandalized. I'm just like, too bad we're being filmed because I would like to.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we're just Jin enthusiasts. Are you part of the Jin cult? Did you change your Oh wait, you don't have social media, so I guess.
No, but I do strongly align with Jin enthusiasts / Jin cult. I'm sort of like, what's an apt comparison? Oh, do you know what an apt comparison is? It's sort of like that one Asian member of the Westboro Baptist Church who's not allowed. Who's not an official member of the Westboro Baptist Church, but like subscribes to all their beliefs, attends every rally, / like is part of like the Sunday worship, but is not an official member, right? For various reasons. I'm the same way as a Jin enthusiast / a Jin cult member.
Try to choose a more problematic group to identify.
I fully realize that is one of the most problematic examples possible, but given how my brain is wired, that was the first one that I thought of.
I mean, I'm not opposed, clearly. And then I feel like he actually has to be very smart. Like look, when I say Jin, like sometimes people take offense. Like if I say somebody like this, I see this happen a lot on like social media. It's probably good that you don't have like Stan Twitter, but like, you know, just because you say one person is smart doesn't mean you think like the other six are stupid, right? Like it just means like they can all be smart. We're just talking about Jin right now. like to make all those puns and like, well, in Chinese, I don't know if this is the case in Korea, but the puns are the highest form of Chinese humor because that means you have to be highly, highly literate. Because Chinese, there's 4 tones, technically 5, I guess. 5 tones, 4 or 5 tones of words. So like, you can make jokes based on like similar tone.
Right.
You can make jokes based on like the written word or like what they share in common, like radicals or components. Like, so puns are like the highest. You have to be highly, highly educated to make puns because you need to know a lot of words and like have a wide vocabulary.
Right.
So to me, I naturally carry that over into like, I have no idea if it's true, but like, because he makes so many puns and like dad jokes, like he has to be intelligent. Right.
I think there are two parts to this, right? I think that's really interesting because I was talking to one of my like Chinese friends, like not Chinese American friends, but Chinese friends, and he was just like, oh, like blah blah intonation or like this like sort of like the third stress on this like this word. Don't you have those in Korean? I'm like, no. And then he goes like, oh, explains why I think Korean's like so monotone, right? Because we don't have like intonations or inflections in the same way that Chinese does, or like we don't have like fourth intonation, right? It's just like because it's phonetic. So really interesting. Second, like it's interesting. I've actually seen puns more as a facet of the Korean American community than I have while in Korea, or like
oh really?
Or my experiences in Korea, including with my friends in Korea, like have never been like full of puns. There's like really occasional puns, but like not a lot. And we don't really associate anything. I haven't associated my Korean puns with intelligence before. It's sort of been like a Korean American thing, right? Because I think like Konglish and puns like work really well together versus Korean, it's much, much rarer. That being said, like, you know, like I just think like the consciousness of BTS speaks to a lot of emotional intelligence, but then like the political activism side of BTS as well has spoken to like a lot of like political, like what we generally think of book smart intelligence, but then like combine them with like the fact like their activism is like pretty radical when they're like at the UN for like women's rights, abortion rights, and gay rights in like a highly conservative society. I think there's a lot of level of intelligence there that like people don't give them credit for. That frankly like K-pop's at fault for, right? Because like K-pop sort of like tones down the individual intelligence of these members to sort of present it to be palatable to society at large. But BTS doesn't really follow that.
Okay. I think it's been a while, so we should probably end this podcast. But in conclusion, what is your favorite thing about Jin?
That's such an unfair question.
Top three.
I think it's a combination of Jin's personality. When you take it in context, is actually the sweetest, most considerate, and most emotionally intelligent personality. I think like that people don't realize is there. And he doesn't, and even though he gets criticized as arrogant and he can like easily clear this up, he doesn't, right? Like this, he's emotionally intelligent enough and secure enough to know that this isn't his labor or duty, as long as those who are close to him know who he is. I think that's like really attractive in a human being. That and his shoulders.
Those are good things. I think for me, it's just kindness. Like he's I just find him very kind. And as someone who is not always very kind, I really envy that. I think that he's just, his kindness comes from security. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's very, he just doesn't give a fuck about what other people think, right? Like, which is actually very similar to how Suga and RM are, except his comes out very like soft. Does that make sense?
Right.
And I would have to say, I just really like the whole package of his aesthetic.
Yeah, absolutely. And his aesthetic is my favorite too, right? So there.
Is it really? Well, yeah, because he's very boyfriend. Like his look, it's just like a normal dude, but just really, really, really good looking. Like,
right.
And rich, maybe.
Am I problematic? Yeah. That's probably problematic in some way. But you know what? Like,
why? Why is it problematic? You
just liking the class. I think there's just like a lot of sort of self-reflection I have to do when like someone's like, oh, you really like the classic like handsome boyfriend look, right? I'm just like, ooh, yeah. There's like probably a lot there to unpack. But let me unpack it when I stop being attracted to Jin.
Let me unpack it when he's packing me. Like,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
very-
Actually, though, I think this is like, yes, I'm queer, I'm a POC. Let me just enjoy this for a moment before I deconstruct it.
And on that note, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell if you're watching it on YouTube, and download us and subscribe. I don't even know how to say it on the podcast channel thing. So yeah, do that. And then
Download, subscribe, share, like, email, or tweet about us. Virginia's a great podcaster, politically relevant, with really great pop culture subjects thrown in between. Thank you so much. Big fan.
Yeah, thank you. All right.